Hello everybody, how are you? Today we are going to talk about the most famous questions when someone or HR asked you in the conversation about to be the teacher mathematics in this school. First, he will ask you, why you want to work here? You will say, I'm searching for a chance to work as a math teacher in your school. As your school has a good position among other schools, this is what make me really want to work for your school. Another question, he will ask you about your thoughts on team teaching. You will say it's a good strategy for teaching students as it makes teachers able to generate ideas, and this is very useful for students learning and makes the class suitable environment for learning. And what about your greatest weakness? You will say there are so many activities and ideas I planned for my students, but class time is limited, so it's difficult to incorporate all of the activities and ideas. So I realized to prioritize what are important my students because I can't do everything I'd like to do. Again, there are so many activities and ideas I planned for my students, but class time is limited, so it's difficult to incorporate all of the activities and ideas. So I realized to prioritize what are important to my students because I can't do everything I'd like to do. Another questions, how do you handle classroom discipline? It's important to develop rules in the first week of class. This allows the students to know what is the suitable behavior, and these rules must be discussed with the students. Again, when you talk about handling classroom discipline, you will say it's important to develop rules in the first week of class. This allows the students to know what the suitable behavior, and these rules must be discussed with the students. And what about class management? Class management refers to the organization of the classroom in order to create the most effective learning environment. Class control. Again, class management refers to the organization in order to create the most effective learning environment. Class control. And two factors determine class management: teacher behavior and the classroom environment. The teacher should look and behave as a professional. Eye contact, it means looking to students while talking to him. It's a way of keeping students attentive and organizing classwork. Again, two factors determine class management: teacher behavior and the classroom environment. The teacher should look and behave as a professional. Eye contact, it means looking to students while talking to him. It's a way of keeping students attentive and organizing classwork. A teacher with both verbal and non-verbal communication. A teacher with both verbal and non-verbal communication forms can be used in the following purpose: to present the meaning of new words and structure, to manage drill. Again, a teacher uses both verbal and non-verbal communication forms can be used in the following purpose: to present the meaning of new words and structure, to manage drill. And what about position? Your position and movement in the class. You will say the teacher stands in the front when presents the new material. The teacher stands in the front when presents the new material. He should be in the middle or the back during practice to supervise classwork. He should avoid sitting on student's desk. And what about movement? You will say, move around the class to give help pair and group work. Move around the class to give help in pair and group work. Number 2, avoid unnecessary movement and avoid distracted students while listening to tab. Again, you will say about position and movement in your class. You will say the teacher stands in the front when presents the new material. He should be in the middle or the back during practice to supervise classwork. He should avoid sitting on a student's desk. And what about movement? Move around the class to give help in pair and group work. Avoid unnecessary movement and avoid distracted students while listening to tab. And what about your voice volume? You will say the teacher should change his voice volume according to the activity being performed, the size of class, the stage of lesson. Again, the teacher should change his voice volume according to, number 1, the activity being performed, number 2, the size of class, number 3, the stage of lesson. Again, the teacher should change his voice volume according to, number 1, the activity being performed, the size of class, the stage of lesson. Okay, another questions. What about your voice volume? Such that height volume, normal volume, soft volume. You will say a height volume used when the teacher wants to quiet the class and when he moves from one stage to another. Again, height volume used when the teacher wants to quiet the class and when he moves from one stage to another. Height volume used when the teacher wants to quiet the class and when he moves from one stage to another. A normal volume used when giving a language model during presenting and drill. Again, a normal volume used when giving a language model during presenting and drill. A soft volume used when giving help during group work. Again, about voice volume, the teacher should change his voice volume according to the activity being performed, the size of class, the stage of lesson. A height volume used when the teacher wants to quiet the class and when he wants to move from one stage to another. A normal volume used when giving a language model during presenting and trial. A soft volume used when giving help during group work. And what about classroom environment? Classroom environment, it refers to physical, social, and physiology condition in which the technique, the teaching and learning process place. Again, classroom environment, it refers to physical, social, and physiological conditions in which the teaching and learning process take place. Rules which help to create the most effective classroom environment: lit and air rooms. Seating, the teacher should make sure that every student can see the blackboard. It's very important. About seating, the teacher should make sure that every student can see the blackboard. And how will you prepare your students to solve a difficult words problem? Number 1, teach students to use flowcharts and other graphic organizers. Have students practice working backwards, make students draw pictures and diagrams. Practice using manipulative. Again, how will you prepare your students to solve difficult word problems? You will say, teach students to use flowcharts and other graphic organizers. Have the students practice working backwards. Have students practice working backwards. Okay. Make sure students draw pictures and diagrams. Practice using manipulative. Teach students to use flowcharts and other graphic organizers. Have students practice working backwards. Make students draw pictures and diagrams. Practice using manipulative. Another question: what type of teaching strategy would you use for students with disability? Again, what type of teaching strategy would you use for students with abilities? You will say concrete math instruction with objects and manipulative. Assigning strong tutor, non-joystick presentation graphic organizer, provide summary modification, provide practice, provide problem for students to make ground. Again, concrete math instruction with object and manipulative. Assigning strong tutors, non-joystick representation graphic organizer, provide summary modification, provide practice problem for students to make ground. And what type of practical would accept to see in your math classroom? You will say standard-based learning objects, stimulating questions for students to practice. Again, standard-based learning objects, stimulating questions for students to participate. Cooperative learning through classroom activities, formative assessment, research-based teaching strategy. Again, if he asked you about what type of practice would accept to see in your math classroom, you will say standard-based learning objects, stimulating questions for students to participate, cooperative learning through classroom activity, formative assessment, research-based teaching strategy. How do you handle or how do you create a safe, supportive learning environment for your students? How do you create a safe, supportive learning environment for your students? You will say, create and enforce clear classroom rules and expectations. Build a strong relationship with students. Follow through of behavior consequence. Immediately stop and intervene in any case of bullying. Again, how do you create a safe, supportive learning environment for your students? You will say, number 1, create and enforce clear classroom rules and expectations. Building strong relationship with the students. follow through, follow behavior consequence, immediately stop and intervene in case of bullying. It's very important. Okay, again I will say it again. How do you create a safe, supportive learning environment for your students? You will say, create and enforce a clear classroom rules and exceptions. Build a strong relationship with the students. Follow through, follow behavior consequence, immediately stop and intervene in any case of bullying. And how do you prepare students for PARTH and other standards tests? Again, how do you prepare students for PARTH and other standards tests? Teach to a legend. Teach to an legend, standard-based and circular. Teach test pre-partition strategy. Stimulate testing environment when administrating classroom assessment. Create an atmosphere of high standards. Be early. Make eye contact. Speak confident. Send a thank you to the students. Again, how do you prepare students for PARTH and other standards tests? You will say, teach to an legend standards-based curriculum. Teach test pre-partition strategy. Teach test pre-partition strategy. Simulate teaching environment when administrating class assessment. Create an atmosphere of high standards. And what about leadership rules? Documentation of student success. Why did you choose a career in education? You will say anything such as that. I love to content. My father is an amazing teacher. I grew up teaching, study mathematics. Anything you want to say about these questions, okay? Number 3. What is your teaching physiology? Teacher-student relationship, building everything, encouragement, raising a child. Question number 4. How will you incorporate technology into the classroom? Technically, such that YouTube to flip classes, Google Classroom to stream education, Google Forms for assessment, Google Docs for evaluation, class website for information. Anything you want to ask about it, such as that YouTube or Google, it's a technology. He asked you about the technology in your class. What about your technology? You can say, I can use YouTube to flip classes, say Google Classroom to stream education, and anything you want to say about it. And he can say, how would you different in structure for adverse class of learners? A teacher with both verbal and non-verbal communication forms can be used in the following purpose to present the meaning of new words and structure to manage the learning. Okay, again, a teacher with both verbal and non-verbal communication forms can be used in the following purpose to present the meaning of new words and structure to manage learning. And how do you manage students' behavior in your classroom? Intervene early, managing lessons, clear set of rules, practice of behavior, and so on. Okay. And what about bullying? What steps would you take to prevent bullying in your classroom? You will say, stop bullying as soon as possible. Know and follow the whole policy. Character building lessons within the curriculum. Know and follow the school policy. Increase on task behavior. And what type of teaching strategy do you incorporate into instruction? You can say hypothesis and generate ideas. Not talking abilities. The students practice separated different students positive. How will you build relationship with parents of your students? Provide high quality instruction in person meeting. Make positive call phone. Make positive phone calls. Meet at student support events. And what formative assessment will you use during instruction? You can say, I can use whiteboard responses, thumbs up, thumbs down, ticket brainstorming, and so on.